Big Shaq asked to switch VIP seats for white passenger. One call later, the entire team is fired. Shaquille O'Neal, known to the world as Big Shaq, settled into his plush VIP seat with an easy grin. The flight was an overnight red-eye taking off from JFK heading west. Shaq had a full schedule ahead, a series of charity events and one highly anticipated business meeting that could reshape his brand. He'd rest, and a first-class seat would help him relax for once. The cabin, bathed in soft lighting, felt like an oasis amid the controlled chaos of boarding. Polite welcomes from the flight attendants and gentle overhead music added to the sense of calm. Shaq was used to traveling in style, but even so he was grateful for each small luxury, especially now after a grueling week of appearances. He took a moment to observe his surroundings. Across the a man in a tailored navy suit scrolled through emails on a tablet. Further down, a woman in a soft pink business ensemble typed away on her laptop. A few rows behind, he could hear the faint hum of a conversation about sports. Someone passionately recounting last night's game. As the last passengers boarded, a tall flight attendant with a practiced smile passed by, confirming that all overhead bins were closed. Shaq smiled back, a smooth ride. Yet that sense of calm shattered the instant a thin, immaculately dressed woman with a pressed white blazer appeared at the front of the first-class cabin. Her face bore the unmistakable mask of entitlement. A second woman followed behind, arms loaded with a designer handbag and an expensive wrap. They paused at the cabin entrance, scanning seat assignments with furrowed brows. Quickly, the impeccably dressed woman's gaze landed on Shaq. He'd seen that look too many times. Someone who believed they outranked him. Shaq pretended not to notice, continuing to flick through the magazine in his lap. Suddenly, the woman stepped closer, stopping at his seat. "Excuse me," she said, her tone balancing between forced politeness and condescension. "I think there's a mix-up. This is my seat." Shaq looked up. "Ma'am," he replied politely. "My boarding pass says seat 1A. I booked this fly a week ago." She frowned, her lips a tight line. "I'm a platinum member of this airline. I always sit in 1A. Now, if you just..." She pointed at the overhead bin. "My bag's supposed to be stowed here, and I'd like to settle in. I'd appreciate your cooperation." A faint hush spread among other passengers, ears pricking up at the confrontation. Shaq remained calm. "I'm sorry, but that's not how seat assignments work. Might be we're double-checking your boarding pass or is speaking to the attendant." The woman's eyes flashed with indignation, and she gestured to a flight attendant standing nearby. A polite young man named Trevor. "We have a problem here," she said sharply. "I need you to fix it." Trevor approached with an apologetic smile, glancing at Shaq. "Let's see," he suggested. "Could I see both of your boarding passes?" Shaq offered his pass confidently. The woman rummaged through her blazer's pocket, producing her pass. Trevor's eyebrows rose. "Ma'am, you're assigned in seat 3C. That's still in first class, but not here." "Impossible," she snapped. "I specifically requested 1A. Please do something." Trevor turned to Shaq, a flicker of nerves in his eyes. "Sir, would you mind switching seats with her? We'd appreciate your cooperation. She's one of our valued flyers." Big Shaq's lips curled into a patient smile, though a flicker of annoyance flickered in his expression. "I reserved this seat in advance. I prefer the legroom here. So, no, I'm not switching." The lady let out a short laugh as though she couldn't believe her ears. "You're telling me you won't let me have it? You can see how tall you are. Maybe you'd be more comfortable in 3C. Shaq's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, I'm 7'1". I specifically chose seats for comfort. I'm not moving because you feel you deserve it more." Trevor cleared his throat, quietly leaning in. "Sir, this passenger is a VIP with our airline. Maybe we can find you another seat, like 2A or 2B. It's basically the same." This felt like a betrayal. "You want me to approve my seat choice because she's important?" Shaq asked, his voice calm, but with an unmistakable edge. "You realize I paid for 1A, right?" The attendant blinked, glancing sideways at the woman's glare. Just trying to keep the peace, sir. The entire cabin's tension soared. People held their breath waiting to see who would give in first. The woman studied Shaq's face, her expression wavering between anger and condescension. Finally, she made a condescending remark. I'm sure whatever business you have is flexible. Some of us run companies, you know. His brow rose. I do too, Shaq said softly, referencing the various business ventures he'd overseen for years, but you wouldn't know that. She opened her mouth to retort, but a phone rang from her bag. She rolled her eyes, answering curtly. Yes, I'm boarding. No, we have a seat problem. So incompetent. They're making it difficult. Wait, who? You can handle it? Without a goodbye, she hung up, turning her attention to Trevor. My associate just called. The airline management will hear about this. I promise you that. Trevor offered a stiff, worried nod. I'm sure we can. Let me get a supervisor. Moments later, a more senior staff member, a middle-aged woman named Felicia, arrived. Felicia's expression held that polished professional calm of airline veterans. She greeted them politely. What's the issue? The woman launched into a tirade about incompetent staff and paying premium, and the seat is rightfully mine. Shaq said nothing, letting her vent arms folded across his chest. But Felicia looked at the boarding passes, her face taut with tension. Ma'am, your pass clearly states 3C. We can try to upgrade you if a seat's free, but this gentleman is entitled to keep 1A. The woman's voice rose a notch. This is an outrage. You realize I can buy out half this plane if I want to. Someone's losing their job over this. Mark my words. Sighing inwardly, Shaq watched Felicia try to calm the passenger. We have no open seats in first class besides your assigned one. Also, no unoccupied seat has the exact legroom of 1A. The woman refused to budge, muttering about calling her contacts at corporate. Then, the phone in Shaq's big paw buzzed. He glanced down, reading a text. Something in his expression changed, like steel setting him behind his eyes. Silently, he typed a quick response. Tap send, then looked to Felicia. I might need to make a call, he said gently. Is that all right? She nodded, uncertain. The passenger sneered. Go ahead. Call whoever you want. I have my contacts too. Shaq made the call. Hey, Tony, he began quietly. Some trouble on the flight? Yeah. The airline you have connections with. They're telling me to because a certain passenger claims she outranks me. A pause. No. We haven't even taken off. Crew name? Let me ask. He politely asked Felicia for the flight number and some staff details. Felicia hesitated but provided them, unsettled by how swiftly this was unfolding. The conversation was short. Thanks, Tony, Shaq said. Yes. Let's sort this out. He ended the call. Returning his gaze to the staff, Shaq offered a calm statement. We'll see. The airline leadership says soon. Felicia attempted a half smile, the woman in white huff crossing her arms. You can threaten me all you want. I know people at the top. Shaq's phone beeped again. He glanced at the screen and a hint of satisfaction reached his eyes. Ma'am, you might want to check with your people because I just talked with mine. 3 minutes later, Felicia's handheld device beeped in turn. She read a message, face paling. She quickly excused herself, stepping aside with Trevor. The passenger looked smug, probably believing this spelled trouble for Shaq. In reality, though, both staff members wore anxious expressions. A tense hush took over the cabin. All eyes were on Felicia and Trevor as they returned. Trevor cleared his throat, addressing the woman in white. Miss Redwood, we've just received instructions from upper management. There's been a change in your traveler finally, she said with a self-satisfied smirk. You've come to your senses. Trevor shook his head. Not quite. He tried to keep it professional, though his voice trembled. We're directed to ask you to deplane. Your ticket has been refunded, and your seat is no longer available on this flight. The calm veneer the woman maintained cracked in an instant. Excuse me, you're telling me I'm being kicked off the plane? Felicia, though clearly uneasy, nodded. I'm sorry, Miss Redwood. The directive came from airline headquarters, something about of another VIP passenger and repeated complaints from staff about your behavior. They've overridden local decisions. The woman's cheeks flamed. You can't do that. I'll have you all fired. Felicia gave a slight shrug. Actually, the message states that a corporate review is being done on our entire staff. If we refuse to comply, we risk losing our positions immediately. Then, Trevor turned to Shaq, voice low and respectful. We've been informed that you have the airline's sincere apologies, Mr. O'Neal. They request you remain on board. Ensure no further disturbance. A stunned silence cloaked the entire cabin. The woman's friend looked at her wide-eyed, not sure how to salvage the situation. Redwood's fury turned to panic as she realized that not only was she losing her seat, but an unstoppable chain of calls that apparently escalated the matter to the highest level. Clearly, her own connections failed in comparison to whomever Shaq had on speed dial. She tried one last time. This is insane. You can't? Are you sure you know who you're messing with? But Felicia stepped forward, her voice more resolute than before. Ma'am, we are under strict orders. Please gather your belongings. The airline has arranged a separate flight for you at a later time. Now, we must ask you to comply. The entire plane watched as Redwood, pale-faced and mortified, grabbed her bag. She and her companion retreated outraged. Once they disappeared the curtain, the hush in first class broke into scattered murmurs. Some of the other passengers exchanged glances of disbelief. Shaq let out a slow breath, capturing a sense that he just avoided a meltdown. He offered Felicia a polite nod. She returned the gesture, though her expression remained tense. The plane's door closed, finalizing Redwood's exit. Settling back in, Shaq could almost taste the tension dissolving. He spotted the flight attendants huddled at the galley, their posture uneasy. They feared losing their jobs. He recognized that more might be at stake. So Shaq called Tony again. Yeah, so the staff's probably on the chopping block if Redwood gets her way. She's threatening them too. A pause. Yes, I see. Right. Thanks. A short time later, the flight attendants reappeared distributing pre-departure drinks. The flustered crew supervisor came over. Mr. O'Neal, do you anything else? We deeply apologize for. He lifted a hand, cutting short her apology. The team doesn't need to worry about Redwood's retribution. My people will handle it. I prefer you all keep your jobs. You've been professional. A wave of relief passed across her face. Thank you, Mr. O'Neal. We appreciate that. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing the flight's imminent departure. The lights dimmed slightly and the hum of the engines rose. As they taxied, the cabin relaxed again, people returning to their reading or quiet conversation. Shaq glanced around, noticing nods of appreciation or a subtle thumbs up from some passengers who'd silently backed him. With take-off smooth and the seatbelt sign turned off, a hush of normalcy returned to first class. Shaq sipped the complimentary, sparkling water, letting the tension drain from his shoulders. He typed a brief note on his phone reflection about power dynamics, about how often these battles repeat themselves. The flight continued without further drama. The attendants offered him dinner, and he ate quietly, occasionally smiling at the staff, who treated him with a cordial respect that felt genuine. Once the cabin lights dimmed for the night, Shaq reclined his seat thinking how easily a simple seat assignment could escalate into a fiasco of entitlement. By the time the plane touched down at its coast destination, word had spread among the entire staff that Redwood's entire corporate account with the airline had been suspended pending investigation. Rumor had it, the airline's executives fired certain employees from Redwood's team for forging priority seat requests. Redwood herself faced potential blacklisting, given her the unprofessional outburst. As passengers disembarked, many offered Shaq polite nods or a quick handshake. The flight attendants thanked him for staying calm and for ensuring management recognized that Redwood's meltdown should not destroy their livelihood. He responded graciously, "We're all just doing our jobs." Right outside, Shaq stepped into the rival terminal, the swirl of travelers rushing to baggage claims or connecting flights, Pulling out his phone, he spotted a text from Tony. All sorted Redwoods group let go apologies from top brass air staff. Remain safe. Good call. A small, satisfied smile touched Shaq's lips. He typed a short reply. Thanks for the assist. He slid the phone into his pocket and paused, glancing back at the plane through the glass windows. One seat, just an assigned number, had become a symbol of a bigger truth. Stand your ground, push for fairness, and sometimes the entire system adjusts. With that final reflection, Shaq, the unstoppable force on and off the court, lifted his carry-on and strode into the city lights.